Hey everyone, welcome back to another weekly review. Wow, how the time has flown. We are already on to week 18, and this past week we kind of expanded upon presidential powers and presidential elections. So diving right in, we're going to look at modern presidential powers. It was a really cool assignment because you guys got to take what you learned 2 weeks ago and kind of apply it to more current events, or at least recent events of presidents, and you got to look at how they have utilized their powers. And this is really important to think about because the way that presidential powers have kind of changed. It's not to say that presidents are necessarily abusing their powers or creating new power, but it is to say that it's definitely changed. And we're going to kind of dive into why some of those powers have changed. Starting off, diplomatic powers. Originally written in the Constitution, the president had the power to negotiate and sign treaties. So they worked with other powers or other nations to establish these treaties, work towards diplomacy, and just establish those relationships. However, it's really wild to think, but it wasn't until 1908 when Teddy Roosevelt went down to the Panama Canal that a president actually traveled outside of the United States. It would have been really hard before, international travel became a lot easier. So we've definitely seen in more of the modern era, presidents being able to exert more of those diplomatic powers that they have. Our presidents are often seen meeting with leaders of other nations and other countries to work on our relationship. And that just makes sense with the advancement of technology. Another thing that we see is the president's legislative influence. As we have all stated multiple times, the president doesn't actually get to write the laws, but their influence on the laws is important. And we get to hear a lot more about the president's, influence through their agenda. We hear oftentimes what they're hoping to get passed, how they're going to work with Congress, and just their interactions with the legislative branch is something that we often pay attention to, and it is something that is important to see with each president. What are they going to influence? What are they going to push for in the legislative branch in order for bills to become laws? And then ultimately, they do have that vetoing power. And the power to veto is, again, another power that was originally given in the Constitution. It is still something that's around today. But each president kind of gets to decide how they're going to use that power. We've had anybody from FDR giving 635 vetoes to Millard Fillmore giving 0 vetoes. So the way that the presidents utilize that power is really going to depend upon who they are as a president, what they're looking to get done. So that's an important thing to look at while you're looking at presidents. When you're looking to vote, how are they going to influence the legislative branch? A power of the presidents that has really changed in the modern era is their position in commander-in-chief. So the president's role in this position has kind of grown. So the last time that war was officially declared by Congress in the traditional sense was World War II. That does not mean that the wars that have been engaged since then or conflicts that we have had with the armed forces since then has been unconstitutional. It's just been kind of changed the way that we've gone about doing it. So a big thing was the passing of the War Powers Act. And this just kind of changed how Congress and the president were going to work together to declare war. So the president kind of has a little bit more authority to send troops where they want. However, they have to inform Congress of those actions within 48 hours of doing them. They then only have 60 days for those deployed troops to stay where they're at in the conflict, or Congress can bring them back. However, Congress can also just say, you know what, we think what they're doing there is important, we're going to keep them there, and they can vote to keep them there. So there is still very much the checks and balances still in place in regards to that commander-in-chief role. The War Powers Act just really changed and modernized how the president was going to interact with his role as commander-in-chief and with the armed forces in establishing where Congress was going to come in and check those. So I think that's important to think about when you're looking at, presidential actions and eventually who you want to vote for someday. You're going to want to see, how are they going to handle conflicts as our commander in chief. And then lastly, another modern presidential power that we've seen kind of increase has been the representation of the people. So the president has always been the representation of the United States in our country. However, we've kind of seen an increase with the president representing the people. So they talked a lot about how JFK, John F. Kennedy, was one of our first presidents to see this because people got to see him on television, watch his debates on television, and that was kind of a huge change for us. It makes people feel more connected to the president, getting to see them. And think about how much that's grown even since then. I mean, our presidents are on social media. That's been a huge contention in the United States. How should the president be acting on social media? So, the way that we think about the president and how we think the president should represent us has kind of changed. And I'm sure that's something that's going to always be changing with the advancement in technology. I'm pretty sure if you would have sat George Washington down and been like, how do you think, the president should act on Twitter, he would think you're crazy. Yet that is very much a conversation we are having now. So it's just important to think about how modern issues that arise, how the presidential powers are kind of going to mold to meet those. The next thing you looked at was electing the president. So you had a lesson on the Electoral College. You had a really great video made by Mr. V. It was very informative. So I'm just going to kind of quickly go over this. If you have any more questions about it, of course, absolutely reach out. But he does have that really informative video. So in Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution, it states, each state shall appoint in such a manner as the legislator thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in Congress, but no senator or representative or person holding office or trust or profit under the United States shall be appointed by an elector. So basically, this is just stating how each state is going to be given a number of electors. So basically, what the Electoral College is a group of electors who cast their ballot for the presidential election. So when it comes to the presidential election, we are not actually a direct democracy. We do not directly vote for the president. Instead, it is done through each state, and you go and you vote for the candidate that you want. The candidate who receives the majority in that state will receive the number of votes that that state is given. So the number of votes that each state gets is based on state representation. Each state has at least 2 votes for each of their senators to represent each of their senators, and then it has the number of votes based on the number of representatives they have in the House of Representatives. So the least number that a state can have is 3, because all states have 2 senators and everyone has at least 1 representative. But the more people you have in the state, the more representatives are going to have, the more votes you have in the Electoral College. And then those states, after they declare the winner, will cast their ballot for that winner, and that is how the president is determined. There are only 2 states that can split it. Maine and Nebraska will split their states, but everyone else, it is winner take all. Winner gets all the votes. And this was just kind of created to allow smaller states to have some more influence in the national elections. Presidential candidates will come from one state, so they wanted to make sure that really populous states could not just be the ones that continuously win the elections because they are giving candidates. They wanted smaller states to still be able to have somewhat of a say in the elections. So you're probably thinking to yourself right about now, like, okay, so if it's the Electoral College that decides the president, like, does my vote matter? Yes, your vote absolutely does matter. It matters because it matters in your state. Ohio decides the winner of the state based off of the votes, and then we send those electors. So whoever you vote for in Ohio is really going to matter because whoever wins this state gets our votes, all 18 of our Electoral College votes. It also matters because there's a bunch of other issues that'll be on your ballots and other elected officials for you to get to vote for, other representatives, your senators, and then local elections, which is very important to partake in as well. So just a reminder, it is still very important for your vote to be cast. Your vote does matter in the Electoral College system. But as always, if you have any questions over any of it, if you have any questions on presidential powers, the Electoral College, anything we have covered at all, please reach out, let us know. Also, the more questions you put into your little chart, the more links that we will send you, whether that be Quizlets or other YouTube videos or other websites, or if we can just explain it again, we'd be more than happy to. So we'll answer any questions you have whatsoever. Hope you have a good week.